Welcome to the Introverted Doctor podcast, the podcast that uncovers myths, mistakes, and misconceptions that keeps healthcare professionals back from living their best life at work, home, and play. I'm Dr. Lalit Chawla, and with each episode, I'll be focusing on different aspects such as communication techniques, mindset, routines, tools, and strategies, with the goal to show how to eliminate anxiety, trip-ups, and unwelcome results that come from ineffective communications. I hope you're doing awesome. Now, in this podcast or video, I'm going to have some visuals, and there's going to be a bit of a PowerPoint presentation. And you can go to theintroverteddoctor.com to watch the video or the YouTube link that you can find that way. And so this hopefully will also translate well in the podcast form, and I'm fairly confident it will. Now, I've had the good fortune of speaking at several conferences lately, speaking at the Canadian Conference on Physician Health. I was down in Phoenix at the Mayo Clinic speaking there, and in Vancouver speaking at the Family Medicine Forum. And I had some really wonderful, kind people who really were brave enough and trustworthy to ask me, what was it, or how can they make their presentations even better? Because we all want to do well in our presentations, and we're trying to communicate something. And if you're in the medical profession or any profession, really, you are going to be giving presentations. So this podcast is going to be talking about how to give memorable and impactful presentations. Giving memorable presentations is easy. And giving a great presentation is really learnable. And I'm going to be doing this through PowerPoint. Now, there are three reasons I'm going to be using PowerPoint. And the first reason is that there are really four types of learners if you really look at things. One is we have visual learners, and PowerPoint really helps those learners. If you just use auditory, you're missing out on the huge visual aspect of it. And the second type of learner is auditory. People who really listen, and that's how their primary way of learning. The third and fourth is kinesthetic and reading and writing. So I'm a very visual and kinesthetic type learner. So for me, having PowerPoint and then reading and writing at times helps. I don't know if you have found that helpful. But sometimes some people they don't use any PowerPoint. And sometimes they use PowerPoint to death. So that's not what I'm suggesting here, but you'll see how I use PowerPoint, and you can see how it could possibly help you. The second reason I'm using PowerPoint is that majority of presentations in the medical field require PowerPoint. I mean, it's very accessible, it's easy to do, and it doesn't take a lot of time and energy to create your PowerPoint presentations. And the third reason to use PowerPoint is that it also helps you stay on track. One of the biggest challenges for people, especially if you're busy like we all are, is making sure that we're delivering the information in the manner that we want. And PowerPoint really helps you stay on point so you don't forget important things. And so it's very useful that way. And those are really the three things about PowerPoint which I find are incredibly useful. 99% of the people will be using PowerPoint in your presentations, and that's important. Now, there are a lot of fears people have about public speaking, but one of the key fears people have is they don't feel prepared. They just don't feel prepared enough when they're about to give a talk. And I'm going to show you how I prepare and what are some key elements when you're about to give a talk. And if you're looking at a presentation, there are several key elements that are involved. I'm going to start off in this episode talking about what's your goal of the presentation. There's only one fundamental question to really ask, and that is, by the end of the presentation, I want the audience to blank. whatever it is. I want the audience to, learn this concept, or to do this type of action, or to feel this kind of emotion. Those are really the key things to ask. So specifically, there are really 3 goals to think about. The first goal is is really about empower or persuade. That's one of the goals. So if that's your presentation, you're either empowering them to communicate an idea, to empower them to change a behavior, or you may be persuading them to use a certain skill in the clinical setting, or persuading them to buy a particular product, or persuading them to move in a different direction. Power and empowering a person, or persuading. The second thing is really educating them. Are you educating them to learn a particular skill set, or are you educating them to a piece of knowledge or a resource that they have not had exposure to that could benefit them? And the third is really to entertain them, whether you're entertaining them to feel a certain way, like an emotion of joy, or emotion of excitement, thrill, or melancholy, whatever it is. So each presentation, for me, I think of it in these 3 things. Now, you can have elements of all 3 of them in your presentation, but that's really the question. And ultimately, all those 3 things lead to some type of action. And that's very useful to think about. So here's some specific examples of what I'm talking about. So answering the question, by the end of the presentation, I want the audience to persuade them to use a procedure to help improve hip replacements or outcomes and complications, to minimize them. Or at the end of the presentation, I want to persuade them not to use antibiotics as much, or empower them how to start a morning routine, or empowering them how to learn magic with their patients so that their patients are more comfortable. I mean, that's the why when I do my presentations. Why do they need to learn magic? That's the question I make sure that I've asked and addressed. And another example is then educating them on the how to use magic to connect with patients. So there's a how aspect of it. Some other examples would be educating them to how to decide between a different option, A, B, C, in, say, a treatment plan, or whatever it is that you're trying to present. Educating them on a resource on how to fix something, or here's a resource that can benefit your organization. Here's a resource that you should share with other people. Another question would be, I would want my audience, if I'm doing a presentation, maybe educating them on how to find time to read more. And an example of entertainment, how am I going to entertain the audience so they experience joy, health, laughter, and they feel a sense of thrill and excitement? Now, these goals are really defined by 2 people, either yourself or an organization. And so it's very simple, but it's very important to think about and be very clear about your goals when you are creating a presentation. That really is the first step. Many people aren't clear about that. And and you can tell that in a presentation when you're like, what were they really trying to communicate? Have you ever heard a presentation you were confused that the message wasn't clear? And I really think that's because they hadn't explicitly for themselves answered that question. So that's really the goal, is really 3 things. What's your goal of your presentation? Empower, educate, or entertain. And presentations that sometimes are not as clear, it's more than likely that the presenter wasn't clear about their purpose, what they wanted the audience to listen to. Have you ever had that where you've heard a presentation, you're like, I'm not sure, did they want this or did they want that? And I know I've been to many of them, and it's really, I think it comes down to not being clear about the goal that they wanted to communicate. The next episode, I'm going to address this box over here, and that is really, what are we going to say to our audience and who our audience is. That is really a real fundamental and important aspect, something that many people miss or forget. So I'll be sharing that with you on the next episode. Thank you for joining me on this episode. And if you found this episode helpful, please feel free to share it. And together we can all do better presentations just by creating a clear, concise, systematic approach. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful day. Have a great week. Thank you.